Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you start taking your seats? Maybe there are still people outside that also want to come in and join us. Some of you are so far back. It would be lovely also for the speakers and the panelists if you can move forward a little bit. Just out of courtesy to our speakers and panelists, if you would come forward a little bit and not sit in the back benches. Thank you. That's very, very kind. It just makes life for those that are here much easier, and it's more cozy. If you want to keep COVID distance, then there's enough space. So I hope you all had a lovely evening and you got some sleep as well for what is today going to be a very, very, very long day. But a very exciting day. There's a lot of wonderful speakers we have invited. We're going to be inspired by so many ideas and information. So I'm hoping that you look forward to this day with me. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself this morning. So my name is Patricia Scherer. We already met last night, and I already hinted at that I have been working with civil society for more than 20 years. I am a former journalist, but today I actually work more on social policy and health issues and climate issues in my daily life. I remember diving into Lake Sevan, the crisp water, after a visit to the church on the hill. And I remember also wanting to touch the green silky hills around Czech that look like the silk that you produce in the city. I remember climbing on one of the towers in Svaneti with the men of the village and looking over the beautiful mountains of that region. And I remember visiting Ukraine in 2019, walking over Bezarabsky market in Kiev and bringing home these red herbs that make each dish a delight. Unfortunately, I have not had the chance yet to go to Belarus nor to Moldova, but I'm pretty confident that all of you have something in common, and that is this deep sense of hospitality. It's in your DNA to be kind to your guests and welcoming to your guests, and to make these wonderful dishes and to treat them even if you have little. And I'm appealing to your amazing sense of hospitality at this conference. Let's be each other's best hosts. Let's show us from our best sides to each other. As we discussed yesterday, showing up for each other, resilience, that's very much also about hosting each other, being kind to each other. And I'm also saying this because I don't really want to remind you of the code of conduct. You all know what the code of conduct is and that we should abide by it here together. We have principles and we want to stand by them. Respect, tact, courtesy. And today, I think what's most important is that we need to be ready to listen to each other, ready to at least see what the other person has to say, even if we don't share their views. I'd also like to say that the human brain is not a multitasker. Our human brain is pretty lazy. It can only do one thing at a time. And those of you who have read Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, you know that if you do more things at once, your brain starts tricking you. So I'm going to ask you to put your phones down, close your laptops, and answer the important email in the break, and do that important call in the break. We have enough breaks. So please extend the courtesy to the speakers, learn from them, because that's the best present we have today. We're going to learn a lot, and we're going to go home with a bag of ideas and hopefully inspiration to do things better and to do things differently. So this precious gift of learning is what we have here today. And as I said, the human brain only knows how to do one thing at the time. So let's use it to learn and to be inspired. I'd also like to remind you that you need to wear your participant's badge so that we can all be safe together. The emergency exits are here located, and then if ever an emergency, then hopefully that won't happen. We can all leave swiftly and fastly together. Please also do not take pictures of the people with the red lanyards. It's to protect them. And in general, don't take pictures or do recordings of people that you haven't asked before, right? That's the courtesy we should extend to them. I'd also remind you of COVID. COVID is not quite over. If you feel comfortable in wearing a mask, please do so. If you feel sick, then maybe stay in your room, contact one of us, and we will try to get you the medical care you need. Last but not least, and this is a value that's very important to me, this event is an environmentally sustainable event, so it's almost paperless. So let's try and keep it that way. So a little bit more housekeeping, and then hopefully I can run you through the agenda. The hotel Wi-Fi, I think you've all discovered it by now. It's without a password. The name of the Wi-Fi is on your badge. You're also invited to use the photo corner and the slogan boards outside if you want to take a picture with your friends, your colleagues for social media. The hashtag is hashtag EAPCSF Prague. And last but not least, if you need interpretation, and I already want to thank the interpreters also for yesterday, then please connect your headphones to that little apparatus. And English is on channel 2 and Russian on channel 1. The agenda of the day, we are paperless, I already said that, is actually on this QR code on the back of your badge if you want to have a look. And we're going to start with welcoming and opening speeches. Then we're going to have a panel debate on a stronger Eastern Partnership that withstands war with some great speakers. We'll have a networking break, as I said, emails, phone calls, please do them in the networking breaks. Then we have a panel debate on strengthening energy security through EAP multilateral cooperation. And then the lunch break. And then in the afternoon, we have some parallel sessions that I'm personally very excited about. I wish I could attend all of them. So there is a parallel session on security cooperation in the Eastern Partnership, resisting authoritarian regimes and strengthening resilience. There's an Eastern Partnership stress test between plans and realities. There's the green reconstruction in the EAP, addressing the environmental impact of the war in a sustainable way. And then again, we have a networking break. The moderators of those sessions will remind you of that. And then we have the workshops. Burnout prevention for CSOs in stressful situations. I think we all need that. Cybersecurity for CSOs, very important topic in these times. And last but not least, how to foster stakeholder relations and collaboration for peace building and peacekeeping in the Eastern Partnership countries. After that, a short break, and then we will have a look at a great documentary. I've already had a sneak peek, so I think it's worthwhile watching. Then dinner, and then hopefully the photo exhibition with pictures from Max Levin and Konstantin Roitsky. So after all this housekeeping information, and now all of you having arrived almost on time, so I hope we keep it that way, I'm going to ask Anna Furtună, Director of the Eastern Partnership, to the lectern. Anna, please welcome the guests.
Good morning, dear friends of the Eastern Partnership. Welcome to the second day of our annual assembly. After a truly inspiring opening ceremony last night at the Czech Chamber of Deputies, I was happy to see everyone joining in honoring our dear Ukrainian colleagues and to witness discussions taking place around a nice glass of wine. Today we enter into the heart of our program with an agenda dedicated to the future of the Eastern Partnership and its multilateral cooperation as the core of the European project and as a founding element of the Eastern Partnership. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has exposed the need for even more regional cooperation, for stronger neighborly links among Eastern Partnership countries themselves, but also among the EAP countries and the European Union. For this, I believe that multilateral cooperation under the Eastern Partnership policy remains an essential instrument, not only because it ensures civil society engagement in policy processes, but also because it facilitates much needed horizontal connections across the different EAP actors, from government officials to civil servants, students, and of course, civil society actors. Connections that are at the core to build a prosperous and stable neighborhood. Last evening, I shared with you my wish for the annual assembly this year was for it to be an occasion to come together, to hug old friends, to make new partners, but also an occasion to reflect together on the future of the Eastern Partnership. And when doing that, I truly wish to see an increased and upgraded level of participation for civil society actors as a key partner in contributing to the sustainable democratic development of the Eastern Partnership region at large. Our own annual monitoring through the Eastern Partnership Index has shown that none of the Eastern Partnership countries can claim to have sustainable democratic institutions. This tells us that the rule of law and the good governance should remain key pillars of the Eastern Partnership policy going forward. The region, including its best performance, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, continue to struggle with fragile rule of law, lack of independent judiciary, and systemic corruptions. Independent of that, civil society is a constant of the Eastern Partnership policy, and regardless of their country's level of engagement with the EU, democratic civil society has always been a stable interlocutor, withstanding illiberal and autocratic forces within and beyond the region. As Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia transitions towards EU integration, a solid partnership with civil society remains important. As we are all aware, the enlargement process is by design an intergovernmental one. It does not include civil society organization. However, looking at the experience of the Western Balkans, it tells us a lot about the risk of not maintaining stable official channels of cooperation with the civil society. In this context, I strongly believe that the Eastern Partnership should serve as a platform for dialogue and engagement between EU institutions, EU member states, partner countries, and civil society, where the latter, of course, should perform its watchdog role and contribute to a stable and irreversible pace of reforms. Moreover, the EAP remains a vital, if not the only, channel for engagement with civil society in Azerbaijan and Belarus. The opportunities created by the policy can help prevent a new Iron Curtain from being built between the EU and Belarus, but also prevent Belarus from being completely absorbed by Russia. Last but not least, relations across the region have never been as tense as they are today. Scars linger as a result of Armenia and Azerbaijan's most recent war. Ukraine has been invaded from Belarusian territory, triggering tensions even between members of the civil society who worked together for years. Going forward, I think we should discuss adding new priorities area to security cooperation, namely peace and trust building. The Eastern Partnership multilateral framework already offers a mediated space for continuous dialogue between state and non-state actors alike, increasing chances for conciliation, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and hopefully societal healings. It embeds the value that Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, as well as Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus, need to internalize as they want to be part of a value-based European Union. Creating working groups focused on confidence-building measures, involving the civil society as a key actor in this process, and providing capacity building on peace and trust building is a must. This would further strengthen the synergy between the Eastern Partnership and the enlargement agendas, and give the EAP countries the opportunity to work towards better relations. Today, we will have the chance to discuss all of these ideas and even more, and I look forward to engaging debates with each and all of you. Thank you, and let's have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much, Anna. Indeed, I hope we will also have a peaceful day. And we already met him yesterday, but I think he's here with us again today. Jaroslav Kurfürst, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Mr. Kurfürst, there you are. So please, your welcoming words.
Good morning, let me say again that I'm very privileged to be part of your annual meeting. I was very privileged to be part of the opening ceremony and to be able also to pay tribute to the heroic Ukrainian civil society, of course, heroic Ukrainian army, and I would say heroic Ukrainian society as such. But the same goes also to other countries like Belarus, who are living under these different difficult conditions. I was invited to speak a little bit about the big design of the Eastern Partnership. That could make sense also because I spent with the Eastern Partnership as a special envoy for the Eastern Partnership last 3 years. So that was my daily bread from 219 until recently. So to speak about the future of the Eastern Partnership, maybe it's good to have a sort of look back and have the emphasis on the big picture. So I will try to do that first, and then I will speak about the possible prospects, because we are in the middle of, let's say, reflection period, where we are trying to discuss what really the future of the Eastern Partnership will look like at the time when the 3 countries are part of the enlargement process. So looking back, I think that the Eastern Partnership is a very clear success. At the beginning, it was created in 2009 here in Prague in May, and the goal of the Eastern Partnership was the economic integration and political association. Of course, all important networks were created, like Euronest, civil society, Forum, like Corleap, and all other links which are so precious. If I look at this short history from the bigger picture, I would identify 3 periods. The first period was a period of visions. The second period was a period of implementation of the visions. And then the third period is a period of political turmoil, tensions, and fragmentation also within the Eastern Partnership. The fifth period, that's of course, that was the DCFTAs, which were ahead of us, association agreement, visa liberalizations, all kinds of networks which were about to be created. And I think that period was coming to an end around 2014, and Russian aggression and invasion and annexation of Crimea. Of course, at that moment, people saw how the Eastern Partnership was precious, but at the same time that there is this geopolitical tension and let's say even geopolitical cost for the choice for freedom and democracy. But then, once the agreements were done, very important period started, and this is the period of implementation. Period when countries started to transform, to implement these CFTAs, implement different treaties. Of course, with Armenia, that was CEPA, which was signed. And that is the period which was not so visible in the media, the headlines, like the first, let's say, period, but which was really critical for the transformation of the country. And the countries did a lot. And then I would say 2020, with the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan and increased pressure of Russia against Ukraine. This is a period of tension. And still, the Eastern Partnership was very important. There was a very successful summit focusing resilience as the key topic. That's very obvious why resilience was focused, because what resilient means, this is the way how to cover vulnerabilities. And indeed, because of that difficult geopolitical neighborhood, and of course, also because some historical legacies, the vulnerabilities are numerous in many countries. And this is maybe a good mission for the Eastern Partnership to address these vulnerabilities and look at increasing resilience. Civil society has an indispensable role in that. I can look back just for Czechia. In 2015, there was this huge migration crisis. Maybe we witnessed all. And that was also the moment after the annexation of Crimea, where Russia was trying to spread the propaganda, use this migration debate, which was difficult in Europe, and come with all kinds of lies and narratives about the end of liberal democracy, end of the European Union, and so on and so on. And we started to discover in Czechia, established democracy, how many propagandist channels on the web we do have, how much the media, how much the new media and social networks were used to spread the propaganda. And the government at the beginning was just looking at it, and that was a new phenomenon. At the forefront was the civil society, who created really very efficient tool to debunk, discover, explain, and highlight the issue. And only slowly the governments, which are always a little bit slower, started to learn and partner with the civil society. And that was really a moment where one understood how civil society is important for resilience of a society, of course, even in the established, let's say, member of the European Union, but this is crucial. And this is just one example. We can go to other fields. Really, civil society has this indispensable role in that agenda of resilience, but also in many others. Thanks to the Eastern Partnership, the DCFTA was able to prepare the Eastern partners to this economic integration. And of course, the economic integration goes also with the will to integrate. That means there is a political momentum. But visa liberalization could not be achieved without the Eastern Partnership. So many student exchanges, which are really dozens of thousands exchanges under Erasmus Plus and so on. Many projects, but especially I would like to stress this transformation. There was always this ambition, important ambition of a trio of the countries for the European perspective. We always believe that there is the inconsistency within the Eastern Partnership when we are asking the countries to accept the rules of the club called the European Union, but we are not giving the perspective to be part of the club. But if you ask someone else to accept the rules of your club and you are telling at the same time that they cannot join, there is a problem, there is the inconsistency. I was very pleased that in June 2022, that inconsistency was removed. And the countries have the possibility to have the European perspective, these countries with the European ambitions, of course. But there are maybe many among the people from other countries who are not having these European aspirations, Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, who would see also the European perspective. And of course, That's the time which will bring the clarity in that. I would like to say that for the future of the Eastern Partnership, we have to admit that the Eastern Partnership as the neighborhood policy might not be that geopolitically important as in the past, but still be very important as a regional format, as a format where civil societies are sticking together, as the format where mayors and parliamentarians are keeping the established formats and cooperation. This is very important. So I see the bright future for the for the Eastern Partnership. It's very clear that the Eastern Partnership should be also a good framework for the enlargement policy. There is the established hierarchy. They are, vis-à-vis the European integration. You have the third countries, then you have the neighborhood policy, then there is this enlargement countries and the members. But this hierarchy might be interrupted, maybe, because the Eastern Partnership should be also part of the enlargement home. And we believe that there are many things which can be done in the Eastern Partnership also for the three aspirants. But the regional cooperation is a must. So let me thank all of you for your contribution in the civil society, for the democracy of your countries, and for the building of the rule of law. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurfürst, also for that hopeful perspective, I think that we all need. So without further ado, I would like to call on stage Mrs. Nicola Bear, one of the vice presidents of the European Union that is with us this morning. Nicola, welcome.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, especially dear civil society activists, Mrs. Furtună, Mr. Deputy Minister. I'm really honored and pleased to be invited to speak to this distinguished audience here today. The timing of this assembly of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum could hardly be more appropriate and needed. The scale of political repression and violation of human rights has increased dramatically in Russia and in Belarus since the start of Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. Ukraine itself is facing not only illegal military aggression, but also horrifying war crimes and crimes against humanity at a scale unprecedented in Europe since World War II. The war against Ukraine overshadows many developments that have seen in recent years in the 6 Eastern Partnership countries, and at the same time affects everything. It challenges the rule-based international order, it challenges our trust in human values, it challenges our confidence to create a peaceful and reliable world. In these times, you, the civil society, is therefore more important than ever. As defenders of human rights and advocates for democratic values, as agents providing humanitarian aid and relief, as organizations that support political prisoners or document forced disappearances, as institutions to report and document war crimes, as a strong force for people-to-people contact and reconciliation, and moreover, more important than ever in these times, we heard it already also by the minister, to counter disinformation and narratives of the Russian aggressor and its supporters. This selfless and relentless work, executed under threat for personal safety, requires recognition and support. Let me express also, as for the European Parliament, I stand for my thanks, support and solidarity to the work you all are doing. 3 civil society activists and organizations from Eastern Europe have been recognized this year the Nobel Peace Prize. The Belarusian lawyer Ales Belyatsky, the Human Rights Organization Memorial, and the Ukrainian Center for Civil Liberties. They all were awarded for their years of struggle against the violation of civil rights. Ales Bialyatsky is just one of the many courageous Belarusians who are in political captivity. Like the imprisoned Maria Kolesnikova, who was transferred to a hospital last week, I wish her all the best, a speedy recovery, strength, and hope. Meanwhile, I signed an open letter to Chancellor of Germany, Scholz, to use his diplomatic means to achieve that independent medical doctors can care for Maria Kolesnikova, that her family and lawyers have access to her, and that she is released from this political imprisonment. By doing so, I extend my respect and hope to all the other victims and prisoners of injustice and suppression of authoritarian and unlawful regimes. And I call again, as a representative of the European Parliament, for the immediate and unconditional release of all political prisoners. It is encouraging that Lukashenko, despite the repression, does not manage to completely silence the voice of opposition civil society, not in Belarus, and in certainty not outside. And those who have fled are continuing the struggle for freedom and democracy from exile. The Belarusian people's embassies, which are active in many, many countries over our continent, play an important role in this, as an interlocutor between Belarus civil society and institutions and organizations in the European Union. The civil society in Ukraine is confronted with incredible challenges as a result of Russia's war of aggressions. Thousands of civilians have fled. Thousands are illegally detained and taken to Russia, facing inhumane treatment and torture. Very recently, I had the opportunity to visit Kyiv together with 7 female European ministers and state ministers. Unfortunately, our discussion with the representative of civil society, including the Ukrainian Center for Civil Liberties, was ended only after a short time by an air alert. This impressively demonstrated the dangerous conditions under which work is done in Ukraine. Nevertheless, I took a lot away from these meetings we had in Kyiv, and it renewed my resolve to continue and even reinforce the support by the European Union. War crimes and crimes against humanity, the deaths of civilians must not become an everyday occurrence for us. Humanitarian aid, winter aid, education, support for victims, documentation of crimes against humanity, civil resistance in the occupied territories. These are all important tasks that civil society is fulfilling in Ukraine in cooperation with the Ukrainian government. Unfortunately, time does not allow me to mention all the courageous and committed civil society activists in all of the 6 countries of the Eastern Partnership. But please, be assured, civil society activists in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Moldova, you are not forgotten. We are aware about the work you are doing in your countries and see your solidarity with Ukrainian people, and we will continue to support you. After all, we are not talking about separate moments, separate developments, separate fights. The fight for freedom and rule of law is always universal and not limited to any country's border. The fierce resistance of civil society in Ukraine, Belarus, and other countries in the Eastern Europe gives hope and inspiration to other societies. The cry for freedom of women in Iran is inspiring people in China to stand up. The activists in Hong Kong may be silenced and imprisoned for a while, but their example is unforgotten and will live on. Every time a civil society stands up against limitation of their freedom of speech, impediment of the rule of law, the independence of justice, or manipulation of elections, dictators and autocratic regimes get the message that they can't and will not prevail forever. I therefore thank you for your extraordinary commitment in difficult and sometimes dangerous situations. I am sure that you will not stop your fight, and I promise not to stop to support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for bringing this important message from the beacon of democracy in the European Union and the European Parliament. And thank you for support. I think it's highly appreciated. So, unfortunately, not everybody could be with us today. One of the persons that could not be with us is Olivér Várhelyi. It's difficult to pronounce his name, I think that's correct, Olivér Várhelyi, the Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement of the European Commission. Nevertheless, he brought a video address for us, so I think it will be interesting to see what he has to say about the enlargement and EAP policy.
Dear participants of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to address this annual assembly meeting. Let me first thank the Forum for organizing this event and for your crucial role in all our partner countries. The return of war to Europe has fundamentally changed the geopolitical context in the Eastern Partnership region. In June, EU leaders recognized the European perspective of Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova and Georgia. They granted the candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova and affirmed they would grant the candidate status to Georgia once the priorities specified in the Commission's opinion have been addressed. Against the background of these major developments, the leaders of the Eastern Partnership Summit last December decided to focus on resilience with all our partners in the East, notably from energy security to the fight against disinformation. Civil society is one of our key partners when we talk about building resilience. They are our key pillar. They were in the first line of our emergency response, helping people flee the horrors of war, supporting internally displaced people, documenting war crimes, delivering medical equipment, or debunking the lies of Russian propaganda. They were also in the first line of response when we provided help to vulnerable people during the COVID-19 pandemic. Supporting civil society has long been a priority for us. They help meet people's needs, reduce inequalities, hold those in power accountable, and promote the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. They control and complement the work of authorities and reach those that the leaders fail to reach. Thus, supporting the efforts of the civil society and exchanging with them continue to be a cornerstone of our vision for the Eastern Partnership. Under the Eastern Partnership agenda, we have already supported 2,500 local civil society organizations, 120 independent media outlets, and 2,000 journalists. This represents a doubling of our previous engagement. Secondly, under the Eastern Partnership agenda, beyond building resilience, we intensely focus on reforms and recovery, which remain as relevant as ever. We work closely with our associated partners so they gradually proceed on their European path. This can be seen in the Commission's opinions on the membership applications of Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine, where a priority to ensure the involvement of civil society in the decision-making processes at all levels is included. The Economic and Investment Plan will remain our main tool for achieving these goals, besides speeding up the green and digital transition and enhancing connectivity. The plan is already delivering on the ground, with over €2.5 billion in investments mobilized to date. But many more projects with great potential are in the pipeline across the Eastern Neighbourhood. We are determined to use it fully, working closely with all stakeholders. I wish you a successful forum with many fruitful discussions.
So we'd like to, yes, indeed, like to send our regards also to Brussels, to Commissioner Várhelyi. To be honest, having worked for civil society, with civil society for such a long time, it opens my heart that the recognition for the important role, this renaissance of the recognition for the important role of civil society is back. And I think that's great news. And I hope that Stefano Sannino, the Secretary General of the European External Action Service, will also echo what has already been said by Nicola and Olivér. Várhelyi. Video address also from him.
Good morning to all of you. My special greetings to the representatives of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for making a difference in people's life every day. And thank you for your courage in often very difficult circumstances. This year is different from any previous year. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has shaken the continent and the world beyond. The EU's key priority is to support Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. We see our world is getting more dangerous. We see international law being violated. We see a multilateral system under pressure like never before. This makes it all the more important for us in Europe to stand together and defend our fundamental values. Together, we stand up for human rights, for the rule of law, non-discrimination, gender equality, diversity, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and of the press, the fight against corruption. This Saturday, we will celebrate the International Human Rights Day. It will be one day more for us to think about all those people imprisoned in Belarus just for standing up for democracy and human rights. To think about women activists who are more than anybody else prone to security threats, intimidation, and harassment. To think about the LGBTIQ people who live in constant fear because of being who they are. There is a lot of work to do for all of us. Your role is of key importance. You are the crucial link between governments and citizens. Furthering human rights and the rule of law is an important priority in the Eastern Partnership policy and key to a more stable and resilient Europe. Through the Eastern Partnership policy, we want to advance necessary reforms and address the global and regional challenges. And we want to work for sustainable economies, connectivity, environmental and climate resilience, the digital transformation, and fair and inclusive societies. In the past months, the government of the European Union member states and the 5 partner countries agreed on a strong mandate to go ahead with this partnership in a more flexible and strategic manner. The Eastern Partnership can also contribute to the enlargement policy. On this point, I would like to congratulate Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia on their steps towards EU membership. This is just the beginning of a long and difficult process. Many reforms will need to follow, and we count on you to engage on this process. We count on you to stimulate changes in your societies. Your critical engagement is essential to help this process. A strong, engaged, critical civil society is a sign of a healthy democracy. Remember that the journey towards the membership of the European Union is a task for all of the society and not only for the government. To the civil society in Belarus, I would like to reiterate our admiration for the work that you are doing under immense pressure from the authorities. The EU has been sending strong signals of support to the Belarusian population in their desire for democratic changes, and we will continue to do so. In the Southern Caucasus, we see a difficult environment where your work is more important than ever. The European Union is ready to contribute to shaping a durable and comprehensive settlement of the conflict, including through support for post-conflict rehabilitation and confidence-building measures. Civil society in Armenia and Azerbaijan have to play an important role in this perspective. Let me end by saying that the European Union is and will remain a strong and reliable partner for your region, and that we count on your commitment to advance reforms in the interest of your people and of your societies.
Indeed, Stefano Sannino also underlined the important role of women activists and their important role as game changers often. One of these game changers is Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, and she is also sent us a special address this morning via video. It's unfortunate that she can't be here. As we all know, the Lukashenko regime withdrew participation in the EAP. That's not the people's will. And we have heard from the speakers this morning how much Belarusian civil society remains supported. It's important to maintain the connection to the people of Belarus. And the EAP Civil Society Forum is one of the few venues where the 6 countries can come together and support each other and maintain this connection. So let's listen to Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya and see what she has to say.
Dear Excellencies, dear friends, I feel honored to address you during such an important stage of our history. I want to thank the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum for the principled defense of democratic values and support for Belarusian civil society. It is Belarusian civil society who helped to preserve Belarusian culture, identity through years of operations and justification. It is Belarusian civil society who organized programs of help to medics while Lukashenko's regime was denied COVID. People didn't know the scale of disaster and didn't have basic means of protection. It is Belarusian civil society who organized 24/7 camp near Okrestina prison in Minsk when beaten and tortured people got released and the world knew the truth about the scale of repressions. After the crackdown, which followed the stolen elections, Belarusian civil society was reborn from the ashes, like it was reborn many times before. After dozens of years under the yoke of the Soviet Empire, dozens of years under the repressive machine of the dictatorship, Belarusian civil society demonstrated the vitality of free people who defied the will of tyrants. Not only in Belarus, but in all the countries of the Eastern Partnership, the civil society has shown that it is the main agent of positive change. The current generations of Belarusians have not lived in a democracy and have no practical experience of working with democratic institutions. The terror in Belarus was aimed at destroying any manifestations of civic awareness. Any initiative was suppressed. For any manifestation of opposite opinion or even unloyalty, people were repressed. During the last 2 years, the regime tried to shut the voices of free Belarusians. The closure of all independent media, the hunt for independent bloggers and journalists, the purge in the academic environment, the deprivation of NGOs' accreditations, repressions against civil activists and human rights defenders. All these steps were not only a plan to intimidate the Belarusian resistance. They were also preparations for regime's co-aggression in the war against Ukraine. It was a plan of clearing the political field to hide the regime's crimes against peaceful Belarusians and of our fellow Ukrainians. But despite all this terror, Belarusians have responded to injustice loud and clear, with a simple word: no. Belarusian NGOs relocated to neighboring countries and restored their activities from there. Media have built their network of civic journalists. Human rights defenders use modern technologies to pass aid to Belarus and collect evidence of regime's crimes. Every day we hear about new detentions, new facts of torture, new crimes of the regime. But every day we also hear incredible stories of civil resistance in Belarus. Belarusians understood the big and painful price of freedom, but they also felt the taste of freedom. Now we know freedom is worth paying any price. Belarusians will no longer agree to live under the whip of tyrant, much less under the dictates of the empire. As never before, Belarusian civil society needs support. At every political meeting, I speak about assistance to Belarusian organizations and initiatives. At my every meeting, I ask to make the assistance flexible so it can reach people on the ground who risk their freedom and life but continues to resist. At my every meeting, I ask to employ the two-sided approach towards Belarus, pressure on the regime on one side and assistance to people on the other. Energy of the society is like a battery of a phone. It must always be charged. After all, the future of democracy around the world is being decided in precisely our region. The outcome of this struggle will determine how Europe of the future will look, and according to what laws it will live. Will they be laws based on respect for the fundamental rights of every person, or laws invented by insane dictators? Depends on coordinated and decisive action by each of us. So today I urge you to not let the regime silence the voices of free Belarus. Give those voices the microphones. I urge you to not let Belarus to fall out of the agenda. Every inhuman act of the regime must be under spotlight. Support Belarusian political prisoners. They must know that their sacrifice will not die in vain. We should fight for the release of everyone. It is not negotiable. Support those who today are forced to flee from repressions and those who are already organizing their life and work within Europe. Consider easing of visa procedures, simplification of legalization. Organize exchange programs and roundtables. Initiate hearings on Belarusian issues. Provide training or assistance for independent media, human rights organizations, and other civil initiatives. Any modest help from international community has a big value for Belarusians. Any assistance will not only be an investment in our democratic future, but an investment in the future of Europe and in our future relations between peaceful, equal, democratic states, members of the European family. The regime of Lukashenko announced that it is leaving the Eastern Partnership, but he doesn't have the right to make such decisions. Belarusians want to stay and embrace this unique program. It will link our nations and will strengthen the resilience of our country facing existential threat at this very moment of our history. Dear friends, now we are in danger of losing the most precious thing we have, our sovereignty, our culture, our very existence as a nation. Belarusians will not allow this. Neither we forgive ourselves, nor our children will forgive us for losing in this war of civilizations. Fortunately, despite the threats, we see that the pressure of tyrants unites us even more and makes us stronger. In many ways, this is also thanks to your persistent support. Please do not stop. Let each of us do more every day than yesterday. And one day we will win. Thank you. Живи Беларусь. Слава Україні.
Powerful words from Sviatlana about unity and solidarity and also the importance of external support. I think we also heard that the EAP Civil Society Forum can play a major role in the future. So I'm going to ask Ana-Otilia, Nutu, co-chair of the steering committee of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, to give us a perspective. Anna, please.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And it's, as always, it's a great honor and a great emotion for me to be in front of all of you. Since all the good ideas and smart smart thinkings have already been said. I'm going to share with you a little bit from my experience with the Eastern Partnership. Because for me, Eastern Partnership is also something that is quite personal. So my first experience with the region was a few years ago when I was working on some regional watchdog projects with friends from several EU countries like Romania and Hungary and Bulgaria, and several Eastern Partnership countries, Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, and then Georgia. And we are looking at the Russian influence in the region using its energy blackmail, its energy leverage. And what was really interesting was that from our research, regional patterns were emerging. We saw, for example, looking at the Eastern Partnership, we saw political blackmail. We saw a lot of money laundering in the sector. We even saw illegal financing of separatist regions. We were then, many years ago, advocating at EU level and in Berlin in particular and other European capitals that we should not become as vulnerable in the EU on Russia as the Eastern Partnership is on energy. We are advocating against Nord Stream 2. There is absolutely nothing that we see in the European Union in energy that we haven't seen in the Eastern Partnership before that, and we have been forewarned. How much of it could we have avoided if we had just paid attention at the right moment at what was happening in the Eastern Partnership? What I'm trying to say is the fact that in the end, the Eastern Partnership has as much to give to the EU as the EU has to give to the Eastern Partnership. And the regional and multilateral approach is something that remains as relevant as ever. So all these challenges, which are in fact regional, have only regional responses to them, and we can do it only together. And this is why, regardless of what particular paths individual states have, regardless of the EU accession process, having in place a regional instrument like the Eastern Partnership remains as valuable as ever. What I'm trying also to say is the fact that right now, with what is happening in the past year, the Eastern Partnership is going to have a new life. It's going to be reshaped, it's going to be strengthened. And right now we are at a critical juncture in which the Eastern Partnership will become also what we make of it. We are building it together. And the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum is as well what we make of it. So if we are pushing it to give it a much more meaningful role, this is something that depends only on us. Thank you very much, and I wish you a successful forum for all of us together.
Thank you so much, Ana-Otilia. So we have so many takeaways to share, but we are running out of time. So I'm not going to linger longer, Tanya. So Tanya Morocco, she is the Policy Advocacy Manager, will moderate the next sessions, and I think you and the speakers of the next panel, A Stronger Eastern Partnership That Withstands War, I would like to ask you to come on stage so we can have our first discussion.
No, feel free. So, thank you, Patricia, for inviting us on stage. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. I'm very happy to open our first panel for this annual assembly, which is dedicated to discussing the future of the Eastern Partnership and of EAP multilateral cooperation. As we heard from Mr. Kurfürst this morning, the EAP is considered a great success by many. At the same time, we are at a crossroad in the policy. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and the European Council's decision to grant EU candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova and European perspective to Georgia have marked a new phase in the policy. A new phase that is even a more multi-speed one, where the 6 EAP countries have different ambitions vis-à-vis the EU, even if they do face common challenges, both internal and external ones. Now, regardless of their different levels of desired engagements with the EU, all EAP countries need a renewed policy offer that draws on the lessons from the past, takes into account the changed geopolitical context that we are now facing, but also meets the expectations of the ongoing war in Ukraine and the needs that are arising from the war and of the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. Basically, a policy that is fit for the challenging times that the region is facing. So today, we would like to discuss the future shape of the EAP and hear different perspectives from our EU partners, but also EAP civil society colleagues. Since there's many of us, we also have Veronica Movchan, who's joining us online, and we are running a bit late with the program. I would kindly ask our panelists to keep to 5-minute interventions so that we can have Q&A and have a lively debate with the audience. And I would like first to turn to Mr. Dirk Schubel, who's a Special Envoy for Eastern Partnership at the European External Action Service, and until recently EU Ambassador to Belarus. So Mr. Schubel, for the last 11 years, the EAP has played an important role in strengthening the cooperation between the EU and the EAP countries. And the EAP is one of the most important regions for the EU. It's a key interest for the European Union, and the EU has a stake in its democratic, peaceful future, in increased economic cooperation and in regional cooperation that is between the EU and the EAP, but also intra-EAP. So could you tell us a little bit about what would be the added value, what is the added value of multilateral cooperation for the EU with the region, and going forward, what areas of multilateral cooperation you think should be emphasized more and prioritized?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being given the floor. I'm very, very happy to be back at the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. I think it's my 7th one, if I counted correctly, over the years. And of course, at a very crucial moment, as many interlocutors already said before. I think we have to start with the date 24th of February. I think that is the decisive date. There is a before and there is an after 24th of February. And that goes also for the Eastern Partnership as such, and I will come to that in a minute. I think that Russia's war of aggression has completely changed the security situation in the Eastern Neighbourhood, and with that also our priorities in many ways. Our EU's first priority, and that was already mentioned by many interlocutors, including by the Vice President of the European Parliament, is to support Ukraine in the face of the Russian aggression. How do we do that? We do that in 3 ways. First of all, unprecedented support to Ukraine, financially, militarily, in a humanitarian way. 19.7 billion euros support of assistance for Ukraine so far, plus more than 3.1 billion euros of military support under the European Peace Facility. Isolation of Russia. We have so far 8 sanctions packages. Work on a 9th is underway. So far we have 1,049 individuals and 60 entities listed on these different sanctions packages. And of course we try to address the global consequences of Russia's war against Ukraine. That means we do outreach to other countries, and we worked also on the solidarity lanes. You will have seen this work, helping Ukraine to export 15 million tons of food and agricultural products since May. So if we come back to the overall picture, I think we have seen overall with a positive dynamic between the EU and the partner countries. Obviously, the most visible positive decision was the June decision of the European Council, which basically provided Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova candidate status, and also to Georgia the accession perspective, so just a little step away, but I'm sure Georgia will make it as well. Congratulations for this. I think that is a result also of all of you from the respective countries who have contributed to this. We're also actively facilitating and supporting conflict settlement efforts by Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we hope also there to see soon a result. And as for Belarus, let me just be very clear, Belarus remains an integral part of the Eastern Partnership, even if the regime suspended its membership or its cooperation with the European Union on the Eastern Partnership. We will work with civil society, with independent media, and with the Belarusian democratic forces such as Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya that we have just seen. Our slogan, so to speak, on the Eastern Partnership remains the same that was mentioned at the summit, Eastern Partnership Summit in December 21, recovery, resilience, and reform. So this agenda is still valid. I will not repeat here, in order to gain some time, the priority areas. I think you know them all. You can read them also in the Council conclusions of December 21. At the same time, we do need to adapt. So an Eastern Partnership going on as usual and business as usual is not on the agenda. We are in a more challenging context, which concerns in particular security, energy supplies, macroeconomic stability. They have come to the foreground, and these areas will be put in particular in the foreground. Resilience is one of the keywords in our agenda, and here I would like to stress that progress on rule of law, democracy and human rights is still the key also to increase your resilience in your respective societies. As my Secretary General, Stefano Sannino, just mentioned in the video, we must stand together for these common values and make concrete progress in these fields. Security aspects can only be strengthened, should be strengthened as well, in particular with regard to areas such as cyber and hybrid threats. Other topics that gain more attention, connectivity, energy I mentioned already, climate change, environment, digital transformation, transport. We had recently some discussions on the Eastern Partnership, both inside among the European Union member states, but also with the colleagues from the governments concerned. We call that a senior officials meeting in our slang. There was also a so-called COEST capitals meeting in September, and all of those basically have reconfirmed the strong mandate for a strengthened and recalibrated Eastern Partnership. The underlying message is that in this difficult time, staying together is even more important than otherwise. There are many common challenges that I just mentioned that require our joint work. We will also, I would also like to mention the European political community, which includes more countries than just the Eastern Partnership countries and the European Union. It will gain also in importance, I think. The policy will also continue to be supported by an important investment and economic plan. 2.3 billion euros are available over the next 5 years. They will generate, as we hope, up to 17 billion euros of investment and contribute to the resilience of the partners. Obviously, the Eastern Partnership, and that is also one change that we need to address, should no longer be only simply complementary, but it should help those who want to go further, namely the three, basically two candidate countries and Georgia, on their way into the European Union, into the negotiation process for enlargement. So the Eastern Partnership play an active role in helping them. It should definitely not be only a standby instrument, it should be actively used. And also for the other countries, I think it should be used to move the countries closer to the European Union. We also want to reduce a little bit on the multilateral framework in terms of meetings. We had more than 100 meetings per year on the multilateral framework. We think that might have been too much, and we might have to concentrate and tailor-make a little bit more these meeting framework and concentrate also more on bilateral relations. Yes, and then of course geographically we want to outreach a bit more to other regions as well. This goes of course in the first place to the Western Balkan countries. Many of them are already candidate countries, so there's I think an interesting exchange needed between the three countries for sure. who have this accession perspective so far of the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkan partners, but it might also be interesting for a country like Armenia to discuss with Western Balkan partners some experiences. The other area is Central Asia. We have been very active recently as European Union with Central Asia. You might have seen this. So we believe that it might also be very interesting to reach out, to have some joint meetings with some of the Central Asian countries on topics such as energy, connectivity, transport, environment, climate change. I think these are all topics that are relevant. All these topics, and with that I will finish, I know you look already at the time, will be discussed next week when we have our annual Foreign Affairs Ministerial meeting. That means the meeting of the European member states foreign ministers and the Eastern Partnership foreign ministers, except for Belarus, of course, which is not part of this. There we will discuss the future of the partnership, security and stability in the region, of course, in the wider context of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Last word, a great thank you to all of you for your fantastic work over all those years. I see many I think I know half of those who are sitting here. I know how hard you have worked over the last few years, and I think you have done a great contribution that the three countries, of course, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, are where they are now, and that Armenia is on a good track, I think, as well. And you have those who are from Azerbaijan and Belarus have done hard work to keep the civil societies in good contact with us, with the governments, but also with the civil societies of the European member states. Please continue this. I look very much forward to good discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schubel, for also acknowledging the role of civil society and for packing a lot of content in this 5 minutes. It's interesting also you mentioned the security, energy, macroeconomic stability as areas of priority, because these are also areas that we have been discussing within our fora and that we will be discussing later today. Exactly, we will have discussions going into depth into energy security, and it's important to continue the discussion also to see how civil society can contribute to cooperation in these spheres. You mentioned that the EAP should be used to help the enlargement process, to synergize with that, and I would like to turn now to Veronica Movchan, who's joining us online. Veronica is Academic Director of the Institute of Economic Research and Policy Consulting in Kyiv. So Veronica, what recommendations do you have in terms of how can the EAP synergize with the enlargement agenda? How can the Eastern Partnership policy support Ukraine in getting closer to the EU in its path towards EU membership, but also how can Ukraine benefit the most from regional cooperation within the EAP and with its neighbors?
Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's my great pleasure to be with you online today. I'm very sorry that I could not come physically, but still I am with you. And thank you, Tanya, for the great questions. They are very important because even last year, it was like a clear perception that we have two very different baskets, two different paths. One is the enlargement path, and other is neighborhood and Eastern Partnership path. And they were not like overlapping. They were developing under their own agendas, also with very similar instruments with similar agendas, but not interacting. Now we are in a new reality, and this reality is extremely painful for Ukraine because it's a war of aggression, and there's actually terrorist war happening in the country now, but also it's a time then we have a new hope to become a member of the European, European Union. As the association agreement is the part of the Eastern Partnership, at least it is under its umbrella, and the association agreement is an important element of the successful enlargement for Ukraine, for Moldova, and I hope for Georgia. There is indeed a lot of complementarity. And it makes the situation somewhat different from accession of other countries and also the Western Balkans, because the association agreements with the EU are a bit of different frame. In 3 DCFTAs that we have, there is embedded a lot of sectoral integration, a lot of opportunities to become a part of the European single market in some elements well before like accession happens, and actually it was not intended, it was like a replacement of the accession. Then it was like designed then. And that has to be used in order to avoid the Western Balkans trap of the long accession path with no clear deliverables, which will result in losing motivation and can be used by Russia to say that the whole path, the whole goal is not valid, not successful. The sectoral integration, the continued duty-free trade, we have it within the CFTAs, but in the CFTAs there are exclusions. Due to the war, EU granted Ukraine the access, duty-free access to this market for all goods. And I hope there will be opportunities to continue these autonomous trade preferences. But it's also the ACA agreement, the access for industrial goods without additional certificates, mutual recognition, basically. There is a recognition of equivalence for food products. There are many opportunities for transport integration that just start in digital market and including the internal market treatment for telecommunications, energy, which has been progressed a lot recently with a major accord in March with NTSO. So there are tools and opportunities, and I hope they will use them. But as of the region, larger region, now seems that Eastern Partnership is not only like common complementary, non-inclusive as enlargement. Eastern Partnership has getting more geopolitical. I'm not sure that whether it was fully like pronounced, but from the external observer, it's getting geopolitical. It's including or outreach in Central Asia, it was just said, also communicating deeper with Balkans. So it's, and it seems it's getting a bit more like not neutral against Russia. It's getting more like into the areas where Russia perceived, wrongly, I would say, as its interest neighborhoods. So actually, I hope that the Eastern Partnership will become, okay, I'm Ukrainian, against Russia. That it will offer other paths of development for the countries in the Eastern Partnership, hope, suggesting that democratic and liberal transformation is much better for welfare than the like moving to the past autocratic regimes that Russia offers. Because, for example, transport, the integration within transport will be very useful if they think about substituting the transit route through Russia, from Asia through Russia to Europe, by the so-called middle path through Caucasus, through Central Asia, Caucasus, and then either Turkey or later on Ukraine to Europe. But it will be economically viable only if there is no cheaper routes for Russia, and it would be available only if Russia is sanctioned and there is no opportunity to ship through Russia. So, there are also other issues, definitely that of the regional importance or global importance that will be implemented in the region, like, I don't know, the environment, first of all. It's our global interest, and regionally it's also very important. But we have to understand that this region, per se, is, especially in the current circumstances, it's not viable by itself, and they cannot concentrate on trade within itself because the economies are not so large. Actually, it's always about trade with the EU or with Russia or Turkey or China. So there are larger partners that will gravitate the main economic interests. And the region It is like transforming and choosing way of gravitation. And the Eastern Partnership is a tool to offer good gravitation, positive gravitation momentum. And I hope that the Eastern Partnership, in its new role, rethought after 24 February, will offer this momentum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica, for your perspective. You also mentioned the increased geopolitical significance of the Eastern Partnership also in resisting Russia's authoritarian model in the region, and I would add also authoritarianism in general. With this in mind, I would like to turn to Valeri Matskevich, who's a representative in the Belarusian Coordination Council for the Eastern Partnership. Valeri, in June 2021, Lukashenko's regime decided to suspend Belarusian participation in the Eastern Partnership. In any case, Belarus didn't have such a strong bilateral cooperation with the EU in comparison to the other EAP countries. Looking at the current state of affairs, the challenge remains open at policy level for Belarusian civil society to participate via the EAP multilateral track. Contacts are growing between Tsikhanouskaya's cabinet and the EU institutions, also EU member states, but without any kind of formalized cooperation. Can you tell us a bit what is the significance of the Eastern Partnership for Belarus, and also what are your priorities vis-à-vis the Eastern Partnership and the priorities of the Belarus Coordination Council?
Да, ну, во-первых, я хотел бы поблагодарить.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the fact that you have our national flag here on display. And this is a clear demonstration of the fact that everybody knows that Belarus and Belarusian society, that's not the Lukashenko's regime. And the fact that Lukashenko's regime decided to withdraw from the Eastern Partnership, that's not a representation of the wishes of the Belarusian society. As a politician, I do not believe in democratic Belarus without civic society. That is why it is so important to develop our cooperation in European partnership, because civic society plays an important role here, and we have to be grateful that Belarus and on the governmental level we see that there were certain expressions of the facts that we will withdraw. There were jokes about our withdrawing from the Eastern Partnership, that basically bridges are collapsing in Belarus, and it became clear who was supporting infrastructure in Belarus, and we see that we won't be able to implement certain projects without the help of the Eastern Partnership. However, we still can influence the future of our country. We can develop our own educational projects. We can scale up these projects on the territory of Belarus. We understand that today, in the period of war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, in the time of hybrid war against Belarus, this is the war for the hearts and minds of people. I would like to repeat what has been said by the ambassador, that there is the period before 24th of February and after. And before 24th of February, we were talking and we could allow certain combinations. We could contemplate on not being principled about our geopolitical choice. We were reserving the right to play with Russia up to that moment, up to the moment when we didn't see the aggression. But now, seeing the horrendous war, we can see more clearly that Belarusians are expressing themselves very clearly. And despite the very strong propaganda, we are part of European family. And it is important that we will stand against these very aggressive ambitions of Russia, and we should not succumb to this oppression. And the EU should play a very proactive role towards Belarus, so that Belarusian society would get very clear and understandable signal. I have already said that a large part of Belarusian society is pro-European, and a large part of Belarusian society looks for support. But it is very clear that the part of the Belarusian society that was pro-Russian after this aggression against our neighbor, these sentiments are changing, and we should use this moment. Well, this is not perhaps the best reason. However, we need to use the fact that the war influenced the sentiment, the momentum of the society. And Belarus is not the Lukashenko's regime. I would like to stress that we are very glad and we welcome the fact that the Belarusian National Platform is part of the Civil Society Forum. We are working as democratic forces, and we've already managed to reach certain success in building some parallel institutions. We have parallel government in a way that is headed by Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya as the head of democratic movement. And my understanding about this united that this government could cooperate with the EU and this interim parliament that is now undergoing reform with representatives of different democratic movements and representatives of the civil society. It could be transformed into the work of Euronest. And by this, we could further develop our cooperation with the EU, including other areas such as culture, education, media. And all this will help us in further forming the civil society now facing the repressions after 2020. Many were forced to leave Belarus Belarus. However, there are still people who are inside the country and they try to change the situation. And thanks to new technologies, we can influence the situation from outside. So two moments that I would like to stress. We are very grateful for Eastern Partnership, for its adaptivity and flexibility and helping Belarusian civil society. And we need to have our interim government to be integrated more closely for cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeri, and for sharing also all these ideas with which Belarusian democratic forces could be further involved within the EAP. I would like to turn now to Lasha Tugushi, Director of Liberal Academy Tbilisi. Lasha, Georgia has recently obtained the European perspective. It's very busy trying to implement the 12 recommendations that it received from the EU. EU membership has been for a long time a top priority of the people of Georgia. It's so clear how important this is for the country. And Georgia is also the only country in the South Caucasus openly pursuing EU membership. And the EAP has been a platform used for regional EU-mediated cooperation also in the region. Looking at it from Georgia, what priorities would you set for the future of the EAP, particularly when it comes to multilateral cooperation, keeping in mind both the South Caucasus perspective and also the fact that Georgia is part of the so-called associated trio?
Thank you very much, dear panelists, colleagues, guests, excellencies, dear moderator. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk about Georgia's European future as well as the regional dimension in a wider Eastern Partnership development context. As you know, Georgia was granted European perspective along with 12 priorities to be addressed to become a candidate country, likewise Ukraine and Moldova. Using this chance, I would like to congratulate both countries with the great success. Of course, my colleagues also congratulate, as well as express solidarity with Ukraine in the heroic fight against the terrorist state, Russia. Let me get back to Georgia, which finds itself in difficult circumstances. There is a high degree of political polarization, which is characterized by a struggle of elites for personal power. Nevertheless, the European idea unites Georgia. The idea of joining the European Union has an unprecedented support among the Georgian citizens, which exceeds approximately 80%. According to reliable polls. I think it's a very high amount of people. At the same time, as we know, Georgia needs to fulfill its 12-point assignment. It already has both achievements and challenges along the way. More efforts are needed in certain directions, like judiciary, de-oligarchization, depolarization, and media freedom. There are also other important issues that go beyond the 12-point homework, such as the release from prison of the head of the opposition media, Nicola, the heavy health condition of the detained ex-president Mikhail Saakashvili and his transfer for a medical treatment abroad. I want to emphasize at the same time that we are only halfway there. However, there is also certain progress of different intensity of several points. For example, parliamentary control under the government, preference of Strasbourg court decision over local ones, gender issue, partly settling anti-corruption issues. There is still the possibility of electing an independent ombudsman. In total, about 20 member organizations of the Georgian National Platform were involved in the various working groups and the committee hearings. Our coalition is key civil societal partner in this process. Unfortunately, Parliament excludes one of our member organization, but I hope we can find together decision based on common interests and change this attitude from the Parliament. I do hope that our achievements will be tangible enough for the country to receive the candidate status. I also have to say that many of us, including the most critical and prominent Georgian NGOs, think that Georgia deserves more than the European perspective. I'd like to emphasize this. I would also like to speak about the Eastern Partnership. It's a fact that since 2009, all 6 countries were developing with different trajectories. After signing by 3 countries the association agreement with the European Union, and especially after granting of the EU candidacy to 2 members of the associated trio and the European perspective to the third one, I mean Georgia, questions appeared about the relevancy of the Eastern Partnership. The question is how relevant or needed this unity is. Can a recipe be found for ensuring cooperation and common interests of countries which find themselves on different platforms? It's clear that we cannot discuss all the ideas in this format, but we must definitely talk about need to identify approaches defining regional perspective in the context of differences between the countries. On the example of Georgia, I will tell you that as a result of getting the candidacy, we expect positive developments not only for Georgia, but also for the trio, the South Caucasus region and the EAP countries as such. For example, developing the peace-building dimension through the mediation of Georgia. We already have examples of effort in the South Caucasus in this direction. Regional economic projects, which include increasing the energy, transit and IT potential of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea basins. It will also give a strong impetus to the democratic developments in the region. As you know, several important projects are under discussions. Just recently, Commissioner said about implying energy and other product supply to the European market through the East-West corridor. Naturally, I am talking about the transit and other potential of Georgia, the realization of which will also engage in its neighborhood, including the countries of the Eastern Partnership. These projects are also of great value for Europe, especially in view of the war waged by Russia, since there is a need for new potentials, diversification of strategic products and transit corridors, where I repeat, the South Caucasus will be given an important role directly linked to the regional projects implemented with Ukraine through the Black Sea. Security, including energy security dimension of the Black Sea, is also important, with the Eastern Partnership countries being an inseparable part of it. And the last point, I must also mention the Georgia-Russian relationship. We went to war with Russia 3 times after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We have many died and displaced. The Kremlin twice organized ethnic cleansing in our homeland. They are still implementing the policy of annexation. Apartheid regime is being established against ethnic Georgians in the occupied territories. Russian tanks are just 40 kilometers away from our capital. About 2,000 Georgians, volunteers and patriots are fighting in Ukraine today. Obviously, there are victims. We understand that Ukraine is fighting in everyone's war. We say always and everywhere, Slava Ukraini. but I am Georgian, and that's why I say long live to independent European Georgia. I hope we will get the candidate status and can continue to move towards membership together with others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lasha. I would like now to move to our last panelist, Mikhail Hovhannisyan, who's the program director at the Eurasia Partnership Foundation. Mikhail, Armenia has been committed to the EAP, but never sought EU membership. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and also its behavior in what concerns the defense of Armenia has led to new debates in the country. We see mounting calls coming also from civil society and pro-Western voices asking Armenia to reconsider also its participation in CSTO and to reconsider overall its relations with Russia. Going forward, how do you see the future of regional cooperation for Armenia under the EAP umbrella, but also with South Caucasus neighbors and Eastern Partnership neighbors and the EU? And how likely do you think it is to see changes in what concerns Armenia's foreign policy direction in this regard?
Yes, thank you very much, Tanya. Just a minor correction, my position has changed. So I'm consultant at the Eurasia Partnership Foundation. It's still the same organization, but a different position. Okay. Dear all, it's a great honor for me to be in this panel today, and thank you very much for this opportunity. In fact, I was also thinking that the first time ever I was in Prague was in 2009 in May, when the first event of this partnership and the pre-forum event took place. So this gives me, to some extent, also an opportunity to retrospectively evaluate, from my personal point of view, how the Eastern Partnership developed. Actually, this is quite an interesting opportunity. And before this panel, the Deputy Foreign Minister gave his division of the time frame of the Eastern Partnership into three phases. And I even wrote it down here, sorry. So it was vision, implementation, and fragmentation. Interestingly enough, I also had my division also to three phases. The first phase was familiarization. So Eastern Partnership countries, mainly the state institutions and civil societies, and to some extent media, were given the opportunity to familiarize with the European Union and vice versa. The second phase was the choice. Basically, all of the 6 countries were offered some frameworks of cooperation. Some made the choice in favor of the association agreement. Some almost made that choice, and then it turned into SEPA, etc., etc. So this was the second phase, and the third phase actually is facing the consequences of that choice, because every choice has turned into, in my opinion, a clash between two systems of values, the authoritarian and democratic. And what we're facing currently is that clash, which has various implications. Again, if we look this 13 years of the Eastern Partnership, what we had several wars, several revolutions, we had various political, economic crises, we had pandemic, so it was full of very, very hard, problematic, difficult happenings across the region. And these are not because we're unlucky, but this is an illustration of this clash between the two systems of values. And in this respect, when we speak, we can take the example of every Eastern Partnership country, and we can see that in this or that way, this clash has illustrated itself. And if we observe, if we try to imagine some kind of a map where the border between the democratic and authoritarian systems of values are passing, and this is an ongoing process, so the border is changing. We can see that it currently passes through Ukraine physically. It passes through Belarus virtually, because we're having even the flag here is an illustration of that. It currently passes through the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. It passes through various internal fluctuations in terms of democratic transformation in Moldova and Georgia. So in this regard, what is beneficial for Armenia, in my opinion, and Armenia is probably one of the countries that is most committed to the multilateral framework apart from the bilateral framework. What is important for Armenia is to see the examples of success of democratic system of values and examples of punishment of the authoritarian system of values. Because I think this is a general tendency that all these conflicting situations, all these problems, all these crises, they raise fears among the public at large on the choice they have made. And in this respect, we are in need of positive precedents, proving that the choice was a proper one, proving that the choice leads to prosperity, to peace, to stability, etc. So if we speak about Armenia, like many other, like all other 5 countries, Armenia is also an explicit illustration of this clash of 2 different systems of values. We had the democratic transition started in spring 2018, and immediately we received the reaction from the authoritarian system of values in form of internal resistance, in form of deconservation of the conflict, and in form of more global crisis of the security systems. And here, what we need, in my opinion, obviously, apart from the commitment to the selected path of transition to democratic system, is a consolidated effort, regional consolidated effort. And we can say that the European Union as an entity is a bright example of this consolidated effort of commitment to selected system of values, which provides better opportunities for stabilizing the process. And so in this respect, what I think is important on the multilateral level for Armenia, and I think for other countries as well, is an attempt at least to jointly implement actions directed towards illustrating their commitments to the democratic values. On the bilateral level, I can say that at the moment, the framework agreement that we have with the European Union, SEPA, is quite a comprehensive framework, which gives Armenia a lot of opportunities to reform, to institutionalize democratic institutions, and also to develop the culture of democracy within the country. So it is an important supplement to this path of democratic transition that was selected in 2018. We also need to understand the risks, the 2 major risks, the external and internal risks, because one of the major problems that we have in this clash between security and freedom is the problem of disbursement of resources, because whenever you have a security risk raising, you have to allocate enormous amount of resources for protection, and you are reallocating them from your reform resources. So this creates enormous amount of problems and obstacles. And I think that what the European Union is doing in Armenia currently is extremely important in that sense, both in terms of the political efforts to stabilize the situation in the region, including the EU monitoring mission, including the political statements, including efforts to facilitate the dialogue, etc. And also the technical assistance, financial assistance to reform of democratic institutions that the European Union is offering Armenia currently. So in a nutshell, what I think we need to bear in mind, not only in case of my country, but in case of all Eastern Partnership countries, is that it's not a choice between bilateral and multilateral tracks. I think it's a challenge to choose the proper balance between these two tracks and to make it the most effective possible. So I'll probably stop here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you, Mikhail, for your insight, and also thanks to all panelists for keeping their introductory comments rather short, so we still have time for a round of Q&A. So I would like to turn to the audience and see if there's any hands raised. I see one. The microphone coming. If you could introduce yourself and before asking your question.
Hi, my name is Emin Husseinov. Thanks for organizing this important event. I'm from Azerbaijan, but unfortunately I'm exile-based civil society representative, but still I'm able to participate here. First of all, I would like to ask for why no one from Azerbaijan represented in this panel, because what I feel, I think it's not equal opportunities for all Eastern Partnership, because we are not represented on equal level in the panel. Second thing, it's not a surprise for me, because we see this like I try to be honest with all of you, and I'm so sorry for using this kind of words. We see disgraceful behavior from EU institutions since a while ago. Relating with Azerbaijan, we know you are looking to us as like alternative for Russian gas and oil today. For example, recently Ursula von der Leyen, she's visited Azerbaijan and she denied to meet with civil society leaders, with the civil society, national platforms members in Azerbaijan. We ask her, please, meet with our partners. Previously, leadership of EU always meet with the civil society, but it's happened until 2015 when Barroso a couple of times met and after. But today, they denied to meet, and Ursula von der Leyen coming to Azerbaijan on 18th of July, signed MOU with Aliyev, and denied to even make handshake with the civil society leader, which is most of them spent years in the prison. And EU, thanks only for serious stakeholders like European Parliament, which is push Azerbaijani government, not executive EU institutions. Lawmakers pushing to Aliyev, and we able to release our partners. But day later, imagine European mission organized a meeting with civil society, and David McAllister, head of the Foreign Relations Department, and EU ambassador, they are invited civil society leader to a restaurant which is honored by president daughters, like dictators, Aliyev daughters restaurant, which is put like huge noisy music, and nobody even able to deliver the message about life threats from powerful ministers. But imagine we are here, we have this microphone, and I would like to say for guys, please don't repeat the same mistake which is you make with Russia. When you betrayed, like EU betrayed Russian civil society, when you engage with Putin with cheap gas and oil for Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, now Ursula von der Leyen repeats the same mistake in relation with Azerbaijan. She's going for cheap gas and oil. Now you're looking also for Turkmenistan, for Kazakhstan to involve them to Eastern Partnership process. Please do not betray your own values, because when you betrayed you betrayed yourself. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. I would like to first address the first question that you mentioned, which is why there's no Azerbaijani representative in this panel. We cannot have all 6 speakers from all 6 countries for all panels, so we will have Moldovan and Azerbaijani speakers in other panels. So I think...
but you have our great Belarusian partners. I think we have a same terrible situation.
You had time to ask your question, so I also would like to hear from other people in the audience. So there will be plenty of occasions for all countries to express their views. For your second question, which pertains to EU engagement with civil society, maybe Dirk Schubel would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm in my new position since early October, so I don't know what happened in July. but I would very much assume that Ms. von der Leyen was on a very tight schedule because she visited several places. So that is my explanation, but I will take the message back. What I can tell you is that when we go from the European External Action Service side, from the Commission side, we always meet with civil society. I was just a few weeks ago in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and in both places in Azerbaijan we met with civil society members, and the views that they express are very important for us. I chaired myself the human rights dialogue with Azerbaijan for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, year by year, and I can tell you that human rights and democracy are very important features of our policy with Azerbaijan as well. It is not only the government contacts. And I do not agree with your comment regarding betrayal of Russian civil society. We had equally very close contact, by the way, they continue today, until today, that we meet with Russian civil society. So I would reject this comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking in the crowd and I see another colleague interested in asking a question, and then
Tamar Ginzurashvili, Media Development Foundation, Georgia. Since title of this meeting is Resilient Civil Society, I would like to underline the problem of shrinking space for civil society organization in Georgia. Lasha mentioned part of the problem. Is there any chance for Georgia to get candidacy status without fulfilling these 12 points? Because the general director of private TV channel affiliated with opposition is in prison, and we are witnessing constant attack against civil society organizations, and government sees problem not in Russia, but in democratic institutions like media, NGOs. If we want to preserve what Georgia has been done so far, probably we should admit the problem, because yesterday Azerbaijani blogger was mentioned, blogger in Belarus was mentioned as imprisoned, but not Georgia. I'm not saying that we have same situation in our country, but without acknowledging challenges which exist in our country, we can have a similar model like in Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you. And a second question here from Alexandru, if we can pass the microphone.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Alexander. I'm from the European Association for Local Democracy, ALDA. We are a Strasbourg and Brussels-based organization, but we've been active in the region, in the Eastern Partnership region, for about 15 years now. Firstly, I would like to have a comment and then a question. On behalf, at least, of our organization, but I'm pretty sure there is a lot of European Union organizations that will endorse it, I would like to salute what Mr. Schubel said. I think the knowledge that was gained in the Eastern Partnership region for the past decades and even more has a good opportunity to be exported also in the Central Asia, especially when we speak about promoting European value, using civil society of promoting European value, and also promoting democracy. Recently we started to work in Central Asia, and I can say on personal experience that indeed there is a lot of room of work there in terms of democracy, and I think that especially what we saw in the trio countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, in adopting the European values can be very much used in those countries from Central Asia as well, in expanding democracy. And now my question is, as majority of you said so, there is already a while since this Eastern Partnership initiative was established. We saw a certain progress. We saw a certain progress in a different progress in different countries, of course. We have, as I said already, the famous trio. We're very much looking forward to have Armenia progressing and joining this trio, and we see their progressive results. Hopefully Belarus and Azerbaijan will join this as well. Nevertheless, we cannot say that all the countries showed the same level of adopting the European values, if I can say so. Looking ahead, let's say for the next 10 years, how you'd see that? How you'd see the Eastern Partnership evolving? Do you see this as a region as such, maybe, or do you see this splitting in several regions, or do you see this more as a bilateral relations between a European Union and each country separately? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandro. And we have one last question from Andrei. And a very quick, very, very short one from Lucina here in the front. So Andrea at the back and Lucina here in the front.
Does it work? Yeah, yes. I have a question for all the panelists probably, but listening to the speeches, I saw the trends of too deep bilateralization of Eastern Partnership. All the countries have their own track of relations with the European Union. We're talking about association trio, but in reality it's not a trio, it's just three countries with a separate relations with the European Union without real political, association and common track. Different conflicts between other countries, complicated Belarus with authoritarianism, proposals to include Central Asia and Western Balkans. So why not to dismantle this Eastern Partnership? Why do we need to keep this initiative in such a way? So maybe better to come back to the previous construction of Eastern or neighborhood policy before Eastern Partnership and create just a new framework with inclusion of Central Asia, Western Balkans, separate relations for the different countries. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And Lucina here in the front.
Lucina Hakopian, European Law Association, Armenia, and I'm also the co-chair of the EU-Armenia Civil Society Platform. Mikhail Hovhannisyan, sitting in the panel, has clearly outlined the linkage between external and internal challenges to the Armenian democracy, and Mr. Schubel has indicated the importance of reaching peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the Armenian civil society very much understands, especially in the light of the last 3 years, the value of peace in the South Caucasus and also for the whole Eastern Partnership. So my question is, does the EU have the tools and leverage and to facilitate these peace talks on fair terms, because the opposite will create really very insurmountable challenges for the Armenian very, very fragile democracy, and the signs of these challenges to democracy we have witnessed throughout these 3 years, also starting from the war in Nagorno-Karabakh. So we would very much, of course, we can discuss what we understand like fair under fairness when we say fairness, but I promised to keep it short so we can have a different discussion on the concept. But like the point is to have these negotiations on fair terms, not to have pressure on Armenia so that we succumb to like decisions that will create further crisis and further instability in the South Caucasus and for the entire Eastern Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucina. We gathered quite a few questions. I think most of them would be for Mr. Schubel, so I would like to start from you.
Yes, thank you very much for all the many questions. I'll try to answer them as good as I can, as short as I can. Let's start with the last question, Armenia. As I said in my intervention, we recently had the chance, together with a number of EU member states, special envoys for the Eastern Partnership, to visit both Armenia and Azerbaijan. And frankly speaking, already the way how we were received was so positive that I'm not very concerned about the Eastern Partnership, and I come to Andrei's question later. But also we left both places with the feeling that both countries are tired of this conflict in one way or another, and that peace is really what they want. both. And so I'm a bit more optimistic that this peace can be achieved. We have our EU Special Representative for the Southern Caucasus, Toivo Klar, who is the man who knows more details than I know. But what I want to say is, with regard to your question on the EU's involvement, you know, we have been asked to become a geopolitical player, or we want to become a geopolitical player. We were almost forced into becoming a geopolitical player through the Russian war in Ukraine. But I think we have also demonstrated with our latest engagement in the Southern Caucasus that we can be a valuable, impartial geopolitical player. What we heard in both places during our visit is that the EU is considered to be not having any stakes in the area and can be really a neutral, honest broker, which not necessarily can be said by other parties who are deeply involved. And I think you know whom I mean. So I think we have made a good start with a temporary sending of some monitoring people. I don't know whether this will be extended or not, I cannot tell you, but I think that was the first point, and also our engagement with the peace talks. President Michel has done a lot of good work, good meetings, and I hope that this will also continue, that we can really contribute to a lasting, fair peace, as you mentioned it. Andrei Yegorov, frankly speaking, I do not agree. I think much of what we have achieved, and I think it was also mentioned by some colleagues here, in the Eastern Partnership has been achieved because you were together. I think you would never have achieved the same if you had been alone. This goes for the civil society as much as for the government level. I think that also the three countries together on the more advanced path, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, have come to that point because they were together in many actions. So together, you're always stronger. And I doubted that a country alone would have achieved the same in that period of time. And I think there are many initiatives that you can only do together. You can only work together on certain subjects in a common way. And I mentioned some of them: connectivity, energy, pipelines. You need to work together. Transport connections, many other topics can be done better together. Reforms, same goes for reforms. Yes, there are individual paths, but if you look at the three association agreements, for instance, that we have, there are many similarities that they have to do together, so you can exchange your experiences and do that in a joint way. So I strongly would say that we should keep the initiative. Yes, it has to be modernized, as I mentioned, but it has to be reloaded in a way more tailor-made. But I would definitely not go back to bilateral relations. By the way, for all critics, I have never heard something better from anyone than what we have. So that is one comment. What will the Eastern Partnership be in the next 10 years? That's a crystal ball question, of course. I think a lot, and you will agree with me, will depend on the outcome of the war of Russia in Ukraine. If Russia does not win this war, I think I'm not concerned that we do not even have only an Eastern Partnership policy continuing, but also that the process of integration of a number of Eastern Partnership countries into the European Union will proceed smoothly and progressively. I do not want to imagine what will happen if Russia wins this war. Let us not imagine this, frankly. Candidate status possible for Georgia. As I said, my job is new now. I have not been dealing. I was sitting in Minsk and in Brussels and following Belarus until October. So I have of course followed a bit Georgia, but I think not everything went perfectly over the last 2 years. Let me put it very diplomatically. And I think the authorities are aware of this, and some first steps are being made from what I can see. Venice Commission is contacted now on one important draft law and a number of other issues. So I'm optimistic that Georgia will make it and will fulfill the 12 requirements that we have put to them. And then this question will not be asked anymore. And I'm sure that Georgia will, at that stage, also receive the candidate status. I think if we work together, and if the government has understood that some things need to be changed, I'm not concerned. Then the first question, no, I think that was the first question. So I think I have answered all. Sorry for being long.
Thank you. Do any of the colleagues want to react? Maybe Michael? Yep.
just a small reaction to Andrei's point about bilateral versus multilateral. I tried to outline to some extent how I understand the necessity to find a balance between these two approaches and not put them as an opposing narratives or opposing paradigms. I think that the combination of bilateral paradigms should compose an integral multilateral paradigm. So this I think is something that should be based on the common values I've been mentioning. And also a quick reaction to the peace issue. I think I fully agree with Mr. Schubel that peace is something really wanted in the region, but we also need to take into account that peace is comprised of various components, including security, safety for the people, justice, etc., and long-term guarantees of stability, which makes the process way harder than it might seem from the initial side. So I think, and here European Union's role is I think growing gradually and becoming more and more important to define all the necessary components for the peace, so that the facilitation and mediation of the dialogue is effective. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for questions. First is about Georgia. Of course, it's difficult to fulfill overnight everything, and we have to be optimistic, have to be realistic in this issue. And frankly, we have two choices. One choice is to be with Europe and part of the European Union, and other choice is to be gubernia, Russian gubernia, or something like this. We don't have any choice, and unfortunately, it's life, and that's why we have to be candidate country, then go ahead, and I hope we can overcome every problems, and maybe in 10 years we will be members of the, like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and I hope other countries also go ahead, because the time is very dynamic, many things change, and I hope Ukraine win this war. I am sure, I'm only hope, I'm sure, because Ukraine not only one single country. Ukraine is main country which are fighting against Russia empire, but we are together, I think. What about trio? I think trio exists, Andrei, I'd like to say, because if you look, for instance, association agreements, three documents were similar. Our trajectories are, it looks like similar. We have common interests, and we have to go together toward the European Union, because it's our interest. And our success is success of other three countries too. I mean, of course, Belarus, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. We have to understand, have to be together and find something which is more pragmatical in this time, And this is very discussable. I agree. I understand why you asking kind of questions, but we have to find something new. We should be more creative. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasha. Veronica, would you like to say a few words as well?
Yeah, with pleasure. Actually, I want to address the question of bilateralization of Eastern Partnership. I would say that it's a bit other way around, because bilateral relations have been always, and they always dominate compared to the multilateral relations, because it's much more bilateral issues to discuss than the shared issues. But multilateral issues is important because there are platforms to find the issues of common interest, and even if we do not achieve immediate results, we discuss them, and eventually it comes into the decisions. Frankly, the neighborhood policy is there. Eastern Partnership is not a substitution, it's a sub-part of the EAP. Whether we need EAP, I think it's now in the transformation. We'll see how it will be called in 2 years after the war is over, Ukraine wins, we are living in a new reality. But that it will be some multilateral and bilateral platforms that I'm sure we just cannot go bilateral path. And the whole discussions, and that they are lovely and active and insightful, shows that they need some multilateral platforms. Whatever we call them, it's up to us.
Thank you, Veronica. And last few words for Valery.
Just 2 words I would like to add. We understand that within 6 countries, membership countries, there are leaders. There are countries that could be called outsiders. However, my subjective opinion as a politician, I would like to say that the Eastern Partnership should work as a regional program focusing on our region. We talking about safety and security of Belarus. We see that there is a common challenge, and we need to have a common platform. And we need to develop both bilateral and multilateral relationships, because we are now all facing this challenge posed by Russia. It is expressed aggression in Ukraine, and there are other forms of Russian aggression in other countries. So it's our common challenge, and we need to face it.
I would like to, thank you all for this exciting debate. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I will not attempt to try to summarize this rich discussion, but I would like to invite the audience to join me in thanking our speakers, and invite Patricia to join on stage.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you so much for this very interesting panel debate. What I took away is that we are definitely stronger when we learn from each other. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is I'm going to ask you to turn to your left neighbor and your right neighbor, because maybe you don't know them yet, and to introduce yourselves. So talk to your right neighbor, say hello. Talk to your left neighbor, say hello. Great. And that's how you make new friends. So I'm going to let you into the coffee break with these new acquaintances you have just made. And I would like us to return here sharp at 11:30, please. Coffee break is outside. Thank you. I have a red scarf that somebody left last night. If this is your red scarf, I have it. Come and fetch it. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. So, 11:30, back from the coffee break in the room sharp. Thank you.